Well, exactly 1 year from today is the deadline for Britain to officially exit the EU. Brexit has been a hotly debated topic since the UK voted to leave the Union back in June of 2016. Prime Minister Theresa May started officially the two-year process with a letter to the EU last March, and now Britain is in negotiations with the rest of Europe to determine the specifics of the move. Jonathan Blake is a BBC political correspondent. He's been following this, and he joins me now from Westminster in England. So, Jonathan, where does Britain's progress stand 1 year into this official Brexit transition?
Well, there's a lot achieved, Rena, but there's an awful lot still to do. The government here in the UK is making a big deal of the fact that we are 1 year away now from the 29th of March 2019, when the UK will formally, officially leave the European Union. 2 years on from that historic vote by a narrow majority where people here decided that they would like to leave the 28-nation bloc, 52 to 48%. What has been agreed so far? Well, the three big issues on the table, which the European Union said had to be agreed before they could move on to talking about Britain's future relationship, what life will be like on the outside. They were the divorce bill, how much money the UK owed the European Union and needed to pay on departure to meet its spending commitments. That's been agreed. It's going to be about £40 billion. And there's also the issue of the Northern Ireland border. You'll probably know the Republic of Ireland is a member state of the EU, but Northern Ireland is part of the UK. So when we leave, there will effectively be a border in place there. But neither side wants any infrastructure on that border. They don't want a hard border that makes it any more difficult for people, goods and vehicles to cross that border. And then there's also the issue of citizens' rights, whether EU citizens living in the UK at the moment and vice versa, British nationals living in Europe, how their rights will be protected and whether they'll be able to stay on as they are now. There was progress on those three issues, which was agreed in December. So the talks now are moving on to the future relationship. But the details of how that will work are yet to be worked out. And the clock is ticking till October, which is the next big deadline in this process, when both sides hope to have an agreement in place on a future trading relationship.
So Theresa May gave an update on the Brexit process earlier this month. I want to actually play you a bite from that update.
Second, the new agreement we reach with the EU must endure. After Brexit, both the UK and the EU want to forge ahead with building a better future for our people, not find ourselves back at the negotiating table because things have broken down.
So critics argue, though, those against Brexit are attempting to make this process really as long as possible to get an extension, which is allowed by Article 50. Do you think that's true, and will that extension potentially happen?
Well, there's already an extension which has been agreed in effect. We have what the EU refers to as a transition agreement, or an implementation phase, as the government calls it. Two different ways of describing basically an extension to the process. So when we formally leave in March 2019, overnight, nothing's really going to change because there is so much to be worked out. It just can't be done in the time available. And you're right that there are politicians here in the UK who are looking to frustrate this process, to slow it down, and in some cases, although it's a very small minority, possibly even stop the whole thing altogether and make sure that Britain stays in the European Union. There's very little chance of that happening, I have to say, but even among the main opposition party, the Labour Party here, they are arguing for a very close relationship with the European Union in the future, which would allow us to stay in what is called the customs union, which allows goods to move around the EU freely without extra checks. So there's a lot of detail to still be worked out, and the process has a long way to run from here on.
Jonathan, I know they're moving forward and talking about policy with this Brexit plan, but, you know, that Cambridge Analytica whistleblower came forward and had said that data mining, according to him, he put forward this claim, did swing the Brexit vote. Is there any movement or any talk about holding another vote on this in light of this information, or is the horse out of the gate at this point?
I think the horse is out of the gate as far as the majority of people see it. There are continuing calls for another referendum based on the final deal that the UK reaches with Brussels on its future relationship with the EU, the terms on which we'll leave. And we've had Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, just today saying that that should be the case. And John Major, the former Conservative Prime Minister from the party in government at the moment, leading the effort to take the UK out of the EU, he also has said that there should be another referendum. There are people arguing for that. I think it's unlikely. The government has said many times that that is not an option. The referendum was decisive as they see it, although it's not legally binding. It gives the government a mandate to take Britain out of the European Union. There are questions, as you say, about the campaigns, both for leave and both for remain, as to whether the rules were followed. The Electoral Commission, that's the governing body here in the UK, which oversees our electoral process, has investigated. So far found no evidence of wrongdoing. But those allegations keep coming, and it may undermine some people's faith in the process, but they're not serious enough yet to call into question the result.
I want to ask you also as well, Jonathan, you know, several countries that are still in the EU are facing substantial economic problems. You look at Greece, you look at Portugal. The Union is losing a strong economic power like Britain. What does the future look for the EU?
Well, the EU's been very clear that they wish this wasn't happening. Brexit is not something that the European Union were ever keen on. They are reluctantly negotiating with the UK to deliver a future relationship. But throughout that, we have heard the officials in Brussels and the other member states saying quite clearly and mostly speaking with one voice, although that's difficult when you're talking about 27 countries together, that the EU must, throughout this process, protect its identity and the benefits, as the other member states would see it, of being in that club. And that's what's making it quite hard for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, but to hang on to the benefits that even those people who are in favour of leaving, some of them at least, would like to see. The European Union will be keen to keep those rules in place and to demonstrate to other member states who might be thinking of having a referendum or thinking about what life might be like on the outside, to demonstrate to them, as they would see it, that they're much better off in than they are out.
All right, Jonathan Blake, pleasure to have you on. Jonathan from the BBC, thanks again for your time.